And we are absolutely delighted to have her here today. Please, let's give her a warm round of applause.
Oh, yeah, of course, all of that and more. Okay, well, I am really, really happy to be here. I am so appreciative that people from different strands of my political life, personal life, and some that I don't know, which is all really wonderful, are here. And so I'm really glad to be doing this, glad to be in LA. The book actually starts out in LA, where I have some tangled history. I guess format. I'm going to start by giving a little bit of overview of why I wrote the book, how it came to be, what the arc of the book is, just to give you a context. And I'll read a couple of sections, short, not to get my voice too tired or you all to just into the listening mode, because really what I find is the most interesting part of any book reading is the question and answers and the discussion. And so even if you haven't read the book, which probably most of you haven't, you will have enough of a sense of it from the introduction and from the blurbs, etc., to be able to ask me probing, interesting questions, and we can all talk about them. So, and then, of course, I hope that you will buy books, because as any author knows, it's good to write a book, and it's good to sell the books, and it's really good to support independent bookstores like Skylight Books in staying alive and surviving, and in doing all these amazing programs. So I really urge you, if for some reason you can't stay till the end, yay! And I know everyone is on a tight budget, but this is one time when the sharing economy is not always the best, but you can share, but just also buy. So thanks a lot. Okay, so as many of you may know, and some of you may not, before I wrote this book, I wrote a memoir, and that is conveniently up here. It's called Arm the Spirit, A Woman's Journey Underground and Back. And that kind of told the story of my political history, our political history. I was part of an organization, a collective, a movement, and that's what the book, that memoir, was about, and my own personal experience of that, being a mother underground or having children underground, etc. So, but after the book, or even while I was finishing the memoir, I began to realize that there were a lot of stories that I hadn't been able to include for different reasons. I mean, after all, that memoir was pushing 350 pages. It was time to stop the stories already, but also there were a lot of things I couldn't tell because of the circumstances and not wanting to violate confidentiality or privacy, history that I didn't really feel in a position, even many years later, that I could just expose, and the people involved in it. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to write something that was fictional. Another very important reason was that I really wanted to try and explore the points of view of other people, not just my point of view on all my political history and activity, because I think, that is one of the things that many of us grapple with as people who are activists, is getting stuck in your own one-sided perspective and not being able to kind of reach out, and becoming closed and sectarian and all those things. So it was really, my path had crossed many other people's during the time I was underground, and also then when I came back after being underground for 13 years. And I really I just wanted to imagine what it was like from the point of view of other people who had met me and how they had seen it. And of course, this is me, my imagination, imagining them. So it's not it's not their story, but it was something I really wanted to do in order to be able to express other people's approaches, and also to try and show how political decisions from one person have a ripple effect on other people that you can't predict. And, sometimes that's hopefully good, and sometimes it isn't. So that was one of the other motivating factors to writing a novel. And then the other was just that I wanted to write. Lots of people like to do that creative expression thing, and I didn't come to this just totally cold. I have written other fiction in the past. I started out a long time ago, like many people, trying to write something in high school, lost that piece of me for many years, but then ironically found it while I was underground, because I did a lot of creative writing and took classes, and that was one of my outlets and one of the ways in which I was able to figure out how to talk about things in an underground situation that I couldn't really talk about except through fiction. So those were some of the pieces that led me to writing this book. And then, it seems like happily, I started it a number of years ago, probably about 4.5 years ago, and happily, I think the political moment now is really a great one for experimentation, for all sorts of people seem to be exploring fiction, the activist fiction that weren't just a number of years ago. And there is so much energy and, conversation about, radical alternatives, radical politics, rethinking things that haven't been discussed for years, I find, in the past, just the past year. So that has been really great to see, and I think it means that it has made the people receptive to this novel in a way that might not have been quite the same a few years ago. So, having said that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the book itself, or how it develops, before I read a couple of passages. So the book starts in the 1980s when Luba Gold goes underground in support of the Puerto Rican independence movement, which coincidentally was the time I went underground in the support of the Puerto Rican independence movement. This is not, it is fiction, and the people are really not the same as any one person, but I'm not trying to veil the coincidences. So that is what starts the book. And Luba meets somebody in a hospital where she's working. She meets a nurse who is sort of a quirky person, a loner, and at one point she discovers that the nurse is her father is Puerto Rican. And this kind of really surprises Luba. The woman doesn't look Puerto Rican. There are different factors. And also just kind of sets the stage for their very contradictory, conflicted, but ultimately very significant relationship. And the woman then, Belinda, ends up being confronted when the FBI come to her door after Luba disappears to ask her where Luba is, and she has to make a decision about whether to talk to them or not. So one of the things I'm really really trying to work on in the book or throughout it is exploring how people make political decisions, especially ones that involve risk, how people decide to do things that are, well, way outside of their comfort zone, especially if they don't have sort of an activist orientation to begin with. And that led me, that question led me to then write about another character in the book, Joan, who actually ends up deciding to become an informer on the movement for a short period of time. And I wanted to write that. I mean, actually, Joan is not someone, a lot of the people in the book are based upon people I knew in one way or another, and then I got taken off from there. But Joan isn't any one person. I mean, I have, unfortunately, known a number of informers and agents in the movement, but no one that was just like Joan. However, as our movements have been continually, repeatedly infiltrated in various ways and damaged greatly by infiltration, I felt like writing about that was important to me, was important to try and just imagine why somebody would take that step and try and balance it out between understanding and without condoning the actions she took. And that's a lot of the struggle of that piece goes throughout the book. So the rest of the book actually takes place once Luba. Those two pieces were from the past, or long ago past in terms of Luba's clandestine life. But then the rest of the book takes place starting in the 1990s when Luba comes back to public life and is much more an exploration of the ways in which the prison industrial complex has kind of taken over the country in the years, those years in between the beginning 80s and the middle 90s, and the ways in which everybody is trying to begin to deal or is touched, is impacted in one way or another by prisons in our society. And that really came out of, my work, my life. When I came back from being underground, in many ways, my life, I felt like, was moving from one prison to another. I mean, I was visiting my partner, Claude, who was in prison regularly. I was visiting women who were in prison as part of the California Coalition for Women Prisoners. And I was visiting a number of political prisoners whom I had known and done political work with before they went to prison. So that whole subject matter and the way in which prisons were playing out really in plain sight but invisibly was something very important to me, to be able to try and explore how they were actually impacting people on a variety of levels. So I think I'm going to now turn to the first little section I will read, which is fast-forwarded. It's dated. It takes place in 2007. It's told from the point of view of another nurse who is working in San Francisco in a hospital, and who one day is confronted or bumps into, literally, a prisoner. So this chapter is called Camouflage, and it's told from Maggie's point of view, and it starts like this. If he hadn't stumbled carelessly against me as I was rushing to cross the street, I might never have noticed him. I was late for my shift on the ortho ward and already irritated that Gordon had been too busy skateboarding to let me know he wouldn't be home after school. So when I felt the man's body weight slump onto mine, I almost shoved him rudely away before I saw his day-glow orange uniform and the chain shackling his feet. If I had pushed him, he would have crumbled downward, helpless, on the pavement below. Sorry, miss, Clay here seems to have lost his balance. The man in the crisply ironed olive green uniform and buff black shoes was tugging on Clay in a clumsy, misplaced effort to get him upright on his feet. Clay was staggering, trying to stabilize himself, but I could tell immediately from his labored breathing and the sweat rolling down the dark wrinkles of his face that the stumble was caused by more than his chains. I think he needs to sit down, not stand up, I said, and began to help Clay settle himself on the curb of the sidewalk. When the guard seemed to hesitate about following the instructions of a small, non-uniformed woman regarding his prisoner, I added in my most commanding voice, "I'm a nurse," and flashed my ID badge at him. "This man may be having a heart attack. We need to call the ER across the street to come get him." That seemed to shake Mr. Olive Green up a little. I wasn't sure about the heart attack, but I imagined that this burly guard wouldn't want to explain a death on his watch. "Okay, I guess. He has an appointment with some other department." He fumbled for a paper in his pocket. "Maybe my partner has the paper. He went to get some food at the cafeteria, which is why I'm here by myself. We usually escort the inmates in teams, you know." He was explaining this to me as if I were the supervisor he might have to justify things to back at the jail. Neurology. Clay's breathing had calmed down enough for him to talk. His voice was gravelly, but surprisingly deliberate. "I have an appointment with the neurology specialist because I've been having trouble with my balance lately." Abruptly, I realized that I hadn't talked directly to the man himself. He was an orange-suited inmate, and I had chosen to communicate with the commander in olive green instead. I appreciated that Clay wanted to take authority over his own condition. "Thank you. Can you tell me what has been happening lately?" I didn't want to do an intake interview, but now that I had heard his voice, I needed to know what he had to say. Despite his distress, Clay quickly described his history of severe headaches, visual impairment, nausea, and increasingly frequent falls that had been ignored for more than 2 years. He left the accusation of malpractice unstated. I was drawing my own conclusions when the ER team arrived. "Thank you, Miss Rafferty, Maggie Rafferty." Only when Clay grabbed my hand to say goodbye could I feel the clawing panic beneath his sharp clinical observations. "I'll check on you later, Clay," I told him as the guard was pulling him away. "I work in orthopedics, but I'll try and come down and see how you're doing later on." By now, I was very late for work, and I knew that Belinda, the nurse I was supposed to relieve, would be drumming her fingers in exasperation, even while she continued to cover me. I started to cross the street again. "Watch where you're going!" I spat furiously at a skateboarder who nearly collided with me as he sailed recklessly through the crosswalk, his camouflage pants and punk orange hair billowing in the wind. "You don't give a shit about anyone but yourself," I yelled at his receding silhouette, trying vainly to slow his arrogance down. He wasn't only risking his own skin. There were those who weren't privileged enough to move about freely as he could, those tied down by canes, walkers, wheelchairs, and chains. But his eyes were riveted on the next thrilling slope ahead, and his thrusting army-booted foot had already propelled him way past earshot. As I made my way through the crowded hospital hallway, filled with nurses who were getting off their day shifts, I tried to shake the image of Clay's chained feet. In orthopedics, I had come to appreciate the importance of feet as the bedrock foundation for the rest of the body. Walking through the hospital corridors, I often found myself speculating on the size, the shape, and the muscle tone of the vast array of feet that stood beneath the fancy Nine West heels, the chic Doc Marten boots, the athletic Nikes, and the utilitarian Keens. A cool shoe might well conceal a gnarled and desperate foot, but there was no way to disguise the chains that entangled laceless, sneakered feet. So that's the beginning of that chapter, and it goes forward with a lot of things that have to do with Maggie's kind of interactions with different prisoners, including a political prisoner that she ends up taking care of in the hospital, and her relationship with him and where that goes. So as you can see, I wrote that chapter very much, well, you probably can't see. I have worked in a hospital. I am not a nurse, but I do a lot of work in hospitals. And during that period of time and through the present, but it was in that era that I really began noticing it, where more and more every day there were more people just being paraded through the hospital corridors in chains in their day-glow orange uniforms, and it was really, and most people were like looking through them, like it was just an ordinary part of their existence. I mean, I don't even know how it registered to everyone. I'm sure people registered in different ways, but it wasn't something that people were able to grapple with or cope with, and I would just feel like I needed to scream, but of course that, so it came out in this story, that part of it anyway. So the next piece I want to read is goes fast forward a few years to 2010, and it's written from the point of view of a young woman who is the daughter of one of Luba's cohort of political activists from the 70s. So this daughter is really wanting to investigate radical politics. She feels like her mother has shut that down because she was burnt out, had a bad experience with the organization that she was part of, and had put that all aside and distanced it. And then the daughter really feels like the mother is keeping things from her, and she wants to really understand what that history was about. And so she goes to visit a political prisoner who she's read about in some of her mother's books, but also she's doing, she's at San Francisco State, and she goes to the library, and she researches, and so she decides to go and visit this woman, Cassandra, in a prison that's nearby San Francisco. And this is told from her point of view, and it's the first visit that she's going to have in the prison. It's called Release, and the woman's name telling the story is Annis. Your limp was the first thing I noticed about you, Cassandra, as you walked into the visiting room. You limped deliberately toward me, angling your body ever so carefully through the narrow spaces between the tables, overloaded with chips, candy bars, and soda. I guess I had expected you, a white woman who had once escaped from prison, to be one of those take-charge striders, like the towering Drucker woman on the poster on my mother's bedroom wall, tramping fearlessly across the city, hair flowing, arms and legs swinging wide, overshadowing the skyscrapers in the background, stomping through everything in her way. But you stepped cautiously, as if one false move could cause a mass chain reaction spill, a dangerous cascade of junk food, overturning one table and then the next until all the grease and sugar landed smack, splattering at the feet of the two imperial guards sitting in command at the front of the room. When you finally got to where I was sitting in the way back, as far away from them as I could get, you said my name, Annis, and you got it right the first time, unlike most people who make it rhyme with peace or release. Then you extended your hand in an assured, graceful motion that made me think that you probably had once walked with that same elegance. You look like your pictures, I said, even though I was thinking how faded you seemed compared to the glamorous woman in the books and magazines I had unearthed at the San Francisco State Library. Even in the posed pictures taken in prison, you had looked fashionable. Your hair was cropped close and sharp around your high cheekbones, your hoop earrings dangled beneath your sunglasses, and your shirt and jeans fit just right. You could have been out on the street rather than posing behind bars. But here, in person, you looked like an inmate, dressed like every other woman in the room, with a loose tan shirt hanging shapeless over beige pants. Your hair hung listless down the sides of your head, hiding its striking shape. I wondered whether you were able to get conditioner in prison, and how often you could take a shower, or if you could buy the kind of lotion that could heal the cobweb cracks under your eyes. Not the kind of questions I had come here to ask you, but the pad with the ones that I had written down to start this interview were locked in a steel case in the visitor processing room, along with my forbidden pen. "Did you have any trouble getting through the processing?" you asked politely, after we had formally introduced ourselves. "Not really," I lied, not wanting to tell you that I had tried to argue with the guard when he said I couldn't bring a pad or a pen into the prison. What could be dangerous about a notepad? He snapped back that I could either obey the rules or forfeit the visit. So I gave up and put the banned pad and pen in the locker like I was told. My friend Shanika used to boast about how she could smuggle in joints, food, almost anything when she went to visit her boyfriend in juvie. Now my clueless self couldn't even get a lame-ass pen into this prison. "You're learning when to give up," my mother had said to me recently, meaning it as a compliment. I almost snapped at her that I was just getting better at camouflage, following in her footsteps. Instead, I walked away, proving her point, perhaps. "Honey, don't let them upset you. You'll get used to all their crazy rules," an older black woman in back of me in the visitor line had advised after my run-in with the guard. She was holding a beautiful, chubby toddler who was sleeping peacefully despite the artificial lights glaring down on him and the suffocating airlessness of the space. "They even enforced the dress code for babies," she confided. Last Easter, she had waited 45 minutes to be processed because there was only one guard on duty that day, even though it was one of the busiest visiting days of the year. When she finally got to the desk, the officer told her that her grandbaby was dressed wrong. At first, she didn't understand what he was saying, even though he kept repeating the words stupidly. "Beige, he's wearing beige." I had just gotten Jemani this cute jumpsuit on sale and never thought about it being an illegal color. As if this tiny boy baby could be mistaken for a grown woman in a uniform. I was so angry, I thought I would bust. But then I wouldn't have gotten to see my daughter, and she would have been so upset not to see her child on Easter. So I went to Target and bought him something else to wear. If I had gone all the way back home to find him some other clothes, it would have been too late, and we would have missed the visit. Coretta gave me another piece of advice when we finally got to the visiting room. She probably could tell that I felt like the air was being sucked out of my lungs after each set of electronic doors thudded shut behind us. Try and get a table at the back of the room. More peaceful that way. Besides, you don't want the guards getting into your business if you can help it. So that goes on, and it becomes a very, very emotional story involving the relationship between Annis and Cassandra, and and we get to know Cassandra a lot through this also, and this was definitely a way of my paying tribute to some of the people that I have visited, in particular one person, Marilyn Buck, who many people will recognize from the descriptions in the story. And I'm here again. I'm not trying to veil it in a way that is not real, although the character Cassandra is an amalgam. It isn't exactly like Marilyn, but it definitely takes a lot from the arc of her life and her story. And so that was something I actually began working on the book, or I had talked to Marilyn about the book or my idea for writing it before she died in 2010. And then after she died, I wasn't even really planning to include her, and then at some point I had to write about her. I mean, it was just part of what I had to do with this novel. So I think I'm going to leave it there for now. I think that's given you enough of just a sense of what the book is like, or what I was trying to do. Of course, there are many other parts, and always in these readings, you have to choose something that is at least accessible. If you get into the total middle of the story, you won't know what's going on. So I hope that's helped, and now I would like to do the fun part, which is open it up for questions. And I hope someone will jump in quickly. Quilty!
So I'm happy to say that I did purchase it, and I'm about this far. So part of me was like, oh, I have to read it before I come. But it was so much more fun hearing you read it.
Oh, really?
So far, so incredible. I love just how, can I start
Yeah.
my comment? And then
Of course, yeah.
I just love how you put so many critical issues. It's intergenerational.
Mm-hmm.
The children, the mother-child dynamics. And the mothers, maybe I'm like listening to it a little bit more intently. But then also the young people that are going to court with their friends, and just how impacted all of that is. I think that you're so intentional about everything, and it really
thank you.
It comes across really beautifully.
Thank you so much, Kruti. And do you have a question?
Oh, she's not.
Yeah.
So, as a current activist around the prison industrial complex, how do you see the books, kind of for the folks that are reading it? What's the action step for you?
Okay, that's good. And it's a question I haven't had before. No, exactly. Well, okay, so I have to say that, in my day-to-day activist work, and for those who don't know, I'm a proud member of the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, of which some other members are here tonight, which I'm very happy about. And we always have action steps, so that's what we need to come up with in order to try and get some traction in this crazy system. One of the things about writing a fiction book like this is not necessarily having a specific action, not one thing. I mean, I think, I would say overall what I hope, although I would really, especially when people read it, like feedback, I mean, I hope that it kind of presents some of the complications and contradictions of an activist life in a way that allows people or encourages people to grapple with them and expect them and not just want to walk away at the first sign or the second or the third sign of crap, and yet feel like the importance of trying to live an activist life and be inventive and changing it up all the time is what people want to do. I mean, so it's really, I think, the action I have in mind is more a philosophical one. Now I do actually, and no one has yet commented or very much on that, but I do have an action at the very end of the book, which is sort of the culmination of a lot of things, which is, taking the clandestine aspect of the title into the future as Annis, the character that we just read about, decides to do. And so, I mean, on the kind of imaginary level, I feel like I am really hoping that people will, think outside the box more and more. I mean, in terms of what, not mimicking what happens in the book or anything, but just, I think we all say it all the time, but I think thinking outside the framework that is being held to us or given us. I mean, right now, if you aren't into the elections, I don't know what planet you're on, and yet, and I will say it because in this space I can, we're being brainwashed, all of us, into thinking the elections and that that what's happening in next November is absolutely definitive, and it makes it hard for people to, not to say other people aren't, a lot of people are, but to me it makes it harder to then expand your universe, your mental universe, and try and keep your eyes on ways that are not being drummed into you 24/7 as, this is the critical issue of our time in the next year, and that's what you have to do. And I welcome anyone who disagrees with me. I'm not trying to use this, I am trying to use it as a way of voicing my opinion. But I know that there are many nuances and many disagreements, and there are many ways of slicing it. So anyway.
Yes, so my question, well, first I've just purchased the book and haven't had a chance to read it. I'm absolutely enthusiastic, both based upon the people who wrote
thank
the
you.
introductions and your presentation. It sounds like it's going to be wonderful.
Great, thank you.
But, my question is directed more towards what you say was the beginning part of the book, more about the people who were underground. The latter part. And going to that, and I've lived a long time, and I've known you and Claude for thousands of years. Right. I'm much older than you, Claude. But it seems, and then I wondered if there was any person in your book that kind of demonstrates this more than others, but that it seems to me that during the period of the 60s and 70s, I knew people who went underground in support of people who were underground, or people who went underground because they had to go underground, or people who chose to go underground so that they could do things that they realized was necessary, and they would have to be in that situation. But it seems to me that, except for the people who went underground because they had done some act and had to do that, most of the people I knew and their decisions, it was, life choices, vicissitudes that were, not necessarily planned, but planned when you begin to operate in a principled way, and you then have to make decisions about what you want to do that except
Right.
for that first group I've described.
Yeah.
A lot of the other
Right,
people
right,
do.
right, right.
And I wonder if there is any part of that beginning part of your book that talks about how it's the same vicissitude that people have when they go and look for an apartment in an area. There are things, I'm just thinking that a lot of what went on in this period was commonplace in a lot of ways. And I wonder if there is...
So you're trying to, does it talk about sort of the decision-making process around a very dramatic decision, but yeah.
Often not dramatic. It
Becomes dramatic, right. So, okay, so the short answer is yes. In terms of, it does weave into one of the stories in particular. I guess I can lead you to that. The story about Joan and how she crosses paths with the person, Luba, who goes underground, does contain some of that. Honestly, I mean, for my real read on that question, which I really have, my memoir actually goes into it a lot. Yes, and it does, because that decision-making process is something that afterwards I wanted to share, because people are, dumbfounded. Why? How? What would ever possessed you? And you seem like a sort of reasonable person or a rational person, and what made you? And so I did want to address that, and I do in much more, outline that in the memoir. In this book, it comes in, it's more, I guess in general, I was trying to do things not in an instructive way, but more to kind of have it come out in the context of the characters. I think one of the things that Luba talks about in the context of the book, though, is, she's trying to do this, she wants to do this revolutionary thing. She wants to be supportive of Puerto Rican independence, but she also wants to have a child. So she wants to do, and she, for a certain period of time, it doesn't seem like it's possible, but then she kind of goes against the rules of her collective, and she ends up having the child, getting pregnant, and that sort of is her own kind of mini rebellion against what the collective decision was. Which isn't like what my own experience exactly, but speaks to a lot of experiences in that period where people were being, if they were part of an organization, were being really encouraged strongly to follow the discipline, whether they agreed with every single thing or not. And a lot of people, I think, did end up accepting things that they weren't happy about later in life and regretted. And so I was trying to, both, show that there were reasons why there were collectives and discipline, etc., but there was also side effects that weren't so good for certain people. In this case, in Luba's case, she decides she's going to do it anyway. But so I really do, those are some of the things that I do try and explore. And, it is true, I think for some people, the part about the underground life is more compelling than a lot of the stuff around prisons, but to me they are very interwoven. I think the thing is, in the era when we went underground, we had a lot of very important reasons, and some of them did really have to do with prisons and prisoners. We just did not anticipate that in the next 20 years, the whole prison complex would become so much more massive, so much more draconian. And we were more narrowly focused in that era on political prisoners. So I feel like there is an interweaving, and I hope at the end I try and bring all the different eras together. Definitely a challenge, but I felt like I had to do it. Anyway, thank you for that question. Colby.
Well, I haven't read it yet, but I'm very excited to.
Good.
Because I love Armin Spirit so much.
Yeah, thank you.
But so I'm wondering, based on what you said before you did the passages too, the piece about trying to write from different points of view,
Yeah.
like the informer in particular, but any of them.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the ones that felt like the most of a stretch, like how was that writing process?
Right, yes, thank you. That's a great question. Yeah, and the informer was definitely the biggest stretch for me. And I really, even after I wrote it, I really wanted to write it. Some things, and, certainly for me, I am not thinking about selling. I thought, I have to write this, whether it's totally successful or not, as a character portrait. I want to try. And I think the difficult thing was, I definitely, as I have said, I've had the misfortune to be involved in situations where, most of the people I've known better were actual agents rather than who, the distinction being that these are people who are paid by the, paid professional employees of the FBI or some other agency of the government. Whereas informers are a more, something that I feel like, people, activists, or people on the fringes of the movement can be more easily drawn into a situation where, for whatever reason, mainly usually money, in many cases, which isn't the case for this character, but for many people, people, they're going to be put in prison if they don't inform, and so they then do that. And there are many, much more, to me, explainable reasons, given the framework of this society and how it operates, for why people would become informers for a certain period of time and are pushed into it. And, so I think that is sort of what I wanted to, some of what I wanted to try and get at. And that's where the thing is, I'm certainly not trying to say, let's all, I am really not, let's forgive all the informers in our midst and just understand them and say, this is part of the society, which of course it is, but I think you have to, my personal opinion and, what I go back and forth in the book is, you have to grapple with the issues of accountability and what it means for people to be accountable. And but then, the other issue is, how do you forgive people who have done great damage in many ways, but for whatever reason, but have actually changed. And, and I wanted to explore that in the relationship to informers, because, it's something we are very committed to in our work with women and trans prisoners, in terms of people's capacity to change and forgiveness, and you make mistakes and then you change your life. And so then when I was thinking about it, so then how does that play out when you have people who have done other types of damage, and or damage directly the movement? And certainly that's true in prisons also, around people who snitch people out, and there is no one answer. You will get, I'm sure, thousands of different answers from people inside, in terms of, definitely snitches are people not liked, and for good reason. And, again, I'm not trying to in any way, condone or make it a simple thing, but in the case of this character, and I didn't really know when I started writing about her where I was going to end up. And I've looked back at it, I should really have done it a little different, but, it's no. But I ended up trying to both, I tried to straddle this thing of making her showing that she had done real damage to people and that it wasn't cool, and yet she had moved on and felt terrible, and therefore at least she was a different person to some extent by the end of the book. So she was definitely the hardest. Most of the other characters, I had, some catalyst person, or more than one person usually, a couple of people who I felt, I knew well, and I could kind of try and really understand. The first woman, the nurse who is that Luba crosses paths with. I mean, she was the person that started the whole concept of the book, because she was somebody that I met when I was underground, at least the beginning person who it was, and I became very close to her, and yet then had to leave in a very abrupt and fashion that never did I really understand how things had impacted her once we disappeared from that part of LA. So I really wanted to try and understand and explore what it might have meant for her. Now, it isn't the same person exactly, and it became someone else through the course of writing it, and that was part of the fun of doing it. That I think, the nice thing about fiction is really that you can let your mind go, and you can try and imagine things. This is sort of a realistic imagination, but I know I can really understand people who really go way far to other zones of the universe, because it really gives you a latitude that, certainly political writing for the most part, or, even the memoir didn't give me. So, thank you. Mary.
Yeah, I was just wondering, can you talk a little bit more about the independence movement, the Puerto Rican independence movement, what happened to those folks, and what's going on now?
And really, so I said this is a conversation, and then I tend to be the dominant person in these settings. I really invite anyone who wants to add or, interject. So I will say some things. Certainly I know Claude could say more, and probably other people in this room could, Michael and other people who know about the independence movement. In reality, I did go underground myself personally in support of Puerto Rican independence, and also Black liberation movement. I just want to make that clear. It wasn't just one movement that we were involved in. And in this book, it's more narrowly defined, just to make it a little more easy to talk about. Many of the Puerto Rican political prisoners of that era have been released over the course of the last 30, 40 years. There is one person there in particular that there's a lot of work still going on around, who is Oscar Lopez Rivera, who has been in prison since 1983. And he is one of the longest held political prisoners, not the longest held, but and when his comrades got a commutation of their sentence in 1999 by Bill Clinton, he decided he did not want to be part of that commutation because it didn't include everybody, which he didn't think was just, even though he didn't disagree with the decision of the others to get out. So, but now it's been 17 years since the other people have their sentences were commuted, and essentially he's being punished for that principled stand. So now even though there's there's no difference between his case and the people who were commuted. I mean, in terms of the fact that they were struggling for independence, they were definitely political freedom fighters. And at the point where the others had their sentences commuted, and then other people have just maxed out of their sentences, there was a recognition that it was important politically for the United States to do something to make amends for the incredible colonial situation that continues to this day. And that was sort of one way of appeasing people, because there were hundreds of thousands of people in the street in Puerto Rico demanding the release of the prisoners. So that was the background to why they were actually received the commutation. Now there are hundreds of thousands of people demanding the release of Oscar, and people from all over the world internationally demanding his release. But so far it hasn't happened. The movement, in Puerto Rico, I think there's ongoing, very strong movement in various areas. I mean, I think some of you may be aware that Puerto Rico is now on the verge of bankruptcy because of its vast debt, a situation that's similar to Greece, but in the case of Puerto Rico, it's a direct result of their colonial status, because they have, their economy is absolutely strangled by the United States economy and dependent upon it. And so what happens, so there is more of a point of tension and more movement around that is kind of bubbling to the surface. There's always movement, but, in terms of the media and the flashpoints, it really is at a crisis point. And, because Puerto Rico it has its colonial commonwealth status, it cannot even get bankruptcy like other states within the United States can claim bankruptcy, and bankruptcy is a tool for actually being able to wipe out a lot of debt. But because of the colonial relationship, they can't. So there's a lot of very difficult, it's at a very difficult point, and the economy is totally tanked. And so, yeah, there's a lot more that can be said. I don't know, Claude or Michael, do you want to add anything? Or no, that's... Anyway, but, I will say thank you for that question, especially for people who don't know about Oscar. Go online. There are many ways to support him, and that, of course, was another, not that Oscar himself is not a character in this book, but certainly I was hoping that through raising again the issue of Puerto Rican independence in the context of this novel, it was another way of supporting and making more visible again the fight for freedom that has been ongoing in Puerto Rico for centuries, but certainly in terms of the United States relationship since 1898, when it became an official colony. I know there are some other questions brewing there. Some, no? Oh, Chrissy! Go.
It sounds like Luba is the character that you're closest.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes.
And then have people that you've based the other characters, have they read the book? What do they think about it? Do you know?
Right. Okay, so here's the good, thank you. So most of them are really an amalgam. I mean, Marilyn is no longer with us, unfortunately, so she has not read it. People who have been close to Marilyn have read it, and so far, I mean, I really actually anticipated more that people would. Everyone has their personal relationships with people, and they see them somewhat differently. So it's definitely hard when you try and represent them to not make someone upset. How could you say that she would really be that insensitive to this particular thing? But I was really trying to make this character a multifaceted person and get away from what is often the case with people who are very righteously revered in our movement, but the sense that they are, icons who are have no weaknesses or issues or whatever. So the person who I really, so one of the people the book is dedicated to my mother, whose name was Luba. And even though she has no relationship to this character, but this is my tribute to her in general. And then to Marilyn, and to Jalil Muntakim, who is another political prisoner who has been in prison since 1971. A wonderful amount of time to be. So he is one of the longest held political prisoners. And so one of the characters starts with elements of him, or the story has elements of him. It really isn't exactly him, but it has pieces of it, and because I've been close to Jalil, and my son has been close to him from a great coincidence of him being in a prison near where Tony was going to school, and because he was then brought to San Francisco as part of the San Francisco 8 case that happened in 2000 and starting in 2005. He became the kind of basis for the political prisoner man who is talked about in the book. So I did, even though I didn't actually say this character is based on you, I did send Jalil the manuscript, or the parts of the manuscript, before the book was written, and for him to read and give me feedback on. And I wanted to make sure that he felt comfortable with what was being written, and so that he didn't approach it as this is me and I'm so that was good. He told me it was all cool. So but it's good that I did that then, because then as soon as the book came out, of course I sent it to Jalil, and he's now in Attica, it came in the box, this book, and his own book of poetry, which has recently been published. It's called Fade to Black, the Prison. Anyone have the exact title? Anyway, Google Jalil Muntakim. It's a new book of poetry of his. Anyway, so he got a box, which had been allowable, sending boxes of books, with my book, his own book, and a couple of other books. And the prison wouldn't let it in. And they haven't so far. They have denied him, and they have used it as a pretext now to deny all books. Which is like incredible, even by most prison standards. They've decided to because they are saying that they are a TV prison, and that the prisoners voted on having TV access, and that vote meant that they shouldn't have any books anymore. I mean, this is a story that really should be out there more than it is, because it's like incredible. I mean, I think we're all just reeling for, I mean, people are still waiting for them to, I mean, he has, of course, grieved it. There has been a story in the San Francisco Bayview. He does have legal help working on it, but it's like, what? Yes. So he hasn't read the whole, he hasn't been able to read the whole book, which is too bad, really too bad. And of course, and he hasn't been able to see his own book in print, which is, in many ways, is the worst. I mean, that they denied him the ownership and the happiness of being able to be, you know, have his book. So, I mean, you know, we're hoping a lot of things, and there's no exact campaign about it, but certainly if you, you know, go to his website, you can find, you could write a letter about that. But, so that is one of the other people who who is most recognizable. The other people, I mean, I had a series of people read it before it was published. Some of them were vaguely connected, but the other people are really less recognizable and are too much amalgams, so I haven't had anyone kind of say anything to me, and I haven't given it to anyone else saying, oh, well, this is really you better read it. Because, in fact, it's not anyone else in particular for the rest of the people, so I don't feel like I'm, you know, being unprincipled in that respect, but it's definitely something. With my memoir, I did much more of that, and then I guess I felt like, okay, I don't have to go around and tell everyone, well, I took the color of your eyes, and I put them in that character, and I took that one, anyway. So, Michael.
Yeah, I did read it, I enjoyed it. I was wondering if you could say a little more about the last section, which is the speculative imaginary future, as opposed to the imaginary history part. Not to give too much away, but one of the characters disappears.
Right.
In clandestine work in the future, somewhat like an anonymous type
Right.
activity. And I'm wondering why you chose to do that, since I think that some of the people who do that probably have not actually disappeared. They're
Anonymous, right. Yeah. Well, okay, so the thing about the future and the actions that are done in the future are really not meant to be prescriptive at all. I mean, and probably, yeah, it's not like I'm saying, oh, this is the best way. Anyone who wants to really get down should do stuff. I mean, really, and I don't think it comes across that way, I hope. I mean, I was trying to speculate, I mean, really, on different pieces of what people don't think could do again in the future. I feel like, you know, for the first, I mean, many years when I came back from being underground, I mean, the era was such that it really was sort of like people could not wrap their minds around why people had ever thought of being clandestine. I mean, just why would you ever do that? And I think there's at least more, people are looking more to history in this era, or at least I've seen that more. And so are more interested in that. And also, I guess, it's just, you know, I suppose one always has their pet peeve. You know, the trajectory of everything is so public now. Everything it's like a cacophony of publicity all the time. Facebook is about, you know, making and I don't want to, you know, that's a too easy horse to beat, but, you know, I mean, Facebook is great, and there's many uses for it, but it makes it so that people can, I mean, I know people say, I can't imagine not putting things up. I mean, it would just, you know, people are addicted, and, you know, so there's this whole thing about what it means to be public in that way, and trying to just suggest or introduce some reasons why you might not want to do everything totally publicly. So, yes, I don't think that people who are in anonymous and do use technology actually are underground in the sense that we were. But I guess what I wanted to suggest, and neither do they use their technology for the most part to further more radical goals, which I think would be great if more people thought that way and had those skills. Again, I'm not advocating for anyone to do that, but it's just about imagining things. And technology, you certainly do need to know something about technology in order to think about, being more disruptive to the operation of the way things are. And so, and also for the story, for the novel, it worked because it was closing a circle. People had gone underground in the past, and then this young woman goes underground in the future. That is the part it's not what I think anyone I have met is about ready to do, or would I advise that they do it. So, but I thought it was, in terms of a novel, it kind of took it beyond the actual literal thing, and I felt like, and it also showed the possibilities, or I hoped I tried to show possibilities for it, that there are ways that it's, of claiming technology or using technology, but in the end, the heart of any insurgent action is the people who actually deal with claiming their ground. And when you get to that part, you'll see what I'm talking about. So. Okay, yeah, sorry.
No, I'm just thinking, this is more of a general question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, I just want to get your opinion, do you think that, leftist movements today and, student movements today have, learned anything from your generation? I feel like maybe not. But I would love to hear your
okay. So, all right. So always, and thank you for asking. This is a good space to talk about everything. And people when they get up here or get to be a book reader, I've done this, been on the other side. Am I an expert on that question or the answer? Not at all. So I'm just going to say I'll just give my opinion, and anyone else who wants to jump in with an opinion on this question is great. Well, I do think that I think there's a lot of things that have been learned or have been studied and tried to people have tried to incorporate. I think the issue of some of the ways in which our organizations in the past, in that era, drew incredibly harsh political demarcations. And, you were either on this side or you were on another side. There was very little room for being in between. The political line, as we called it, and, was of the essence. And it really fed sectarianism, and it fed, I think, exclusionary kinds of politics. And, that was one of the things I wrote a lot about in my memoir, actually. So I do think people have studied that and have seen that, and have really thought deliberately about that in different ways. Has that meant that there's no exclusionary or sectarian politics today? No. I think people still struggle with the same issues, but I think there has been learning about that. I think people have studied some of certainly levels of male-defined, macho relationships to militarism, I would say, have been studied and exposed, and pointed at as really problematic, and I do think, that's another thing I, wrote more about in my memoir. I definitely think they were. Sometimes I think that people then say that anything that has to, I'm not a pacifist, I'll just say that. I don't think that anything that has to do with using any kind of force or whatever is just about male defined or macho or whatever, which is sometimes a very simplistic way of discounting a lot of history. So I think, but I think people have been able to deal with the nuances. The they is also a very general, because there's so many different parts of the movement today and what different people are doing. I think that there's been, I think there has, especially in the recent couple of years, the capacity of groupings like Black Lives Matter and others to really develop direct action in a way that is really, startling and in your face and determined, and is really takes a lot of, I think, learns some things from the past and then takes them further. So I definitely think, it depends. Some people, I do think, when I know the historians among us here, in general, it's always good to study history. I feel like the country as a whole, and this many people comment on, it's ahistorical. It seems like people feel like we all invented things in the moment, and it's all being reinvented now, and that is not. And if that's what you're speaking to, I think it's really important for people to study history, and not just the history of this country. In fact, that's just a tiny, tiny little, really the history of the whole of the international situation of international struggle is really the most instructive from my point of view. But so I hope that people do. I think a lot of people do. I think that, unfortunately, I think there is maybe more, of a demarcation between the people who study this stuff in the academy and then the activists who, do implement or do try and figure out how to bring struggle forward. So I think for the number of you all who are really activist scholars, I think that is a really important thing. I don't think the only way to study history is by doing it in the academy. I really don't think that. But it definitely is one way, and there's a lot of supportive infrastructure for it being done in that context, and it can be used in some amazing ways. So So thank you for that question in terms of, I think it's important, even though there's no one conclusion. I don't think there's any, everyone's going to look at different pieces of history and come up with different, So,
Okay, maybe we'll get ready.
buy books. I will sign. Whoever wants me to sign, I'm happy to do it. Thank you so much for being such an engaged crowd.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget that you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.